I pulled into the driveway at 3 o'clock on December 23rd, earlier than I'd planned. The house looked like a magazine cover. Christmas lights dripped perfectly from the eaves, casting a warm glow on the ridiculously manicured lawn. It was exactly as Kendra, my daughter-in-law, always insisted it should be. Everything was about appearances. At 67, I'd learned to just roll with Kendra's brand of high-stress holiday organization. I grabbed my overnight bag, bracing myself for the usual chaos. My son, Mitchell, fumbling with a last-minute toy assembly, while Kendra barked orders from the kitchen. The front door was unlocked. That was the first prickle of unease. Kendra was obsessive about security, a triple checker of locks and alarms. "Hello?" I called out, pushing the door open. "I'm here early." The silence that answered was heavy. It was wrong. The house felt hollowed out, sterile. The massive Christmas tree stood sentinel in the living room, a perfect pyramid of presents beneath it, but there was no music, no smell of baking, no sound of footsteps. Mitchell? Kendra? Nothing. I set my bag down, my footsteps echoing on the polished hardwood floors. The kitchen was spotless, counters wiped clean, no roasting pans, no cookie sheets. It was as if the entire family had evaporated. Then I saw him. In the living room, parked by the window, sat Harrison. He was Kendra's stepfather, a man I'd only met a handful of times since the wedding. In all those years, he'd been a silent fixture in the corner, frail and seemingly lost in a fog, while Kendra hovered over him with a brittle, barely concealed irritation. He was in his wheelchair, as always, but something was different. He looked up at me, and his eyes, they weren't foggy. They were sharp, alert. There was a grim determination in his gaze that made me stop cold. "Hello, Corinne," he said. His voice, usually a frail mumble, was clear and steady. "I was wondering when you'd arrive. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you." My heart started a heavy, panicked rhythm I couldn't name. "Harrison, where is everyone? Where are Mitchell and Kendra?" He didn't answer. He just gestured with his chin toward a piece of paper taped to the armrest of his wheelchair. My hands trembled as I peeled it off. The handwriting was Kendra's. Perfect, precise, and cold. Corinne. Decided to take a last-minute trip to Ireland for Christmas. Things were just too hectic. Harrison needs looking after. His pills are in the kitchen. Just make sure he doesn't fall. We'll be back after New Year's. K. I read the note 3 times. Each word was a tiny, cold slap. No apology, no explanation for abandoning their Christmas guest, just instructions. They had left him here like a piece of unwanted luggage. They just left you, I said, the words numb. Harrison let out a dry, rasping laugh that held zero humor. "Oh, they left me here, all right, but not in the way you think." His tone made me look closer. His shoulders weren't slumped. His hands, resting on the armrests, weren't shaking. "I don't understand," I said. Harrison leaned forward just an inch, but the movement was electric. He locked his eyes on mine. "Tell me, Corinne, in all the years you've visited this house, have you ever once heard Kendra speak to me instead of about me?" The question hit me. I flashed back through years of family dinners. Kendra, adjusting Harrison's blanket without asking if he was cold. Kendra, changing the TV channel without asking what he was watching. Kendra, sighing to Mitchell. Dad's having a bad day, while Harrison sat right there staring at the wall. She talks about you," I admitted carefully. "About me, yes, but not to me," he said, shaking his head. "They think this old brain is too foggy to notice." He glanced out the window, then back at me, his gaze sharpening. "They think I'm too far gone to understand they left me here to die. Shall we get started?" My blood ran cold. "Harrison, what are you talking about? Get started with what?" He gave me that same grim, humorless smile. "We have work to do, Corinne, and we're on a clock. But first, tea. I imagine you're cold from your drive." Before I could process it, he put his hands on the wheels of his chair and spun himself toward the kitchen. I followed, my mind reeling. In the kitchen, he wheeled up to the counter, set the brake, and then did something that made my breath catch in my throat. He gripped the edge of the counter, pushed, and stood up. His movements were a little stiff, but he was steady. He stood there, rolling his shoulders, and then walked, unassisted, to the cabinet, retrieving 2 mugs. You can walk?" I whispered. "I can walk, drive, think, and remember every single condescending pat on the head Kendra's given me for the last 2 years," he said, his voice hard as iron. He filled the electric kettle and clicked it on. "The wheelchair?" "A prop," he said. "The confusion? An act." I watched, stunned, as he prepared the tea. His hands were perfectly steady as he poured the steaming water, not a single drop spilled. "Kendra always said you couldn't be trusted with hot liquids," I murmured. "Kendra says I might burn myself or spill or create a mess," Harrison said, his lip curling. "She says a lot of things. She's been building a narrative, and I've been letting her." He carried the 2 mugs to the kitchen table and sat down, not in his wheelchair, but in a regular kitchen chair. He looked, for the first time since I'd met him, like a man in complete control. "Harrison," I said, my voice shaking, "help me understand what is happening here." "What's happening," he said, leaning forward, "is that I've been playing the role of a declining old man because it was the only way to stay alive in this house." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Stay alive?" "Stay alive," he confirmed. "It started about 2 years ago. I had a minor stroke just after Hannah died." He pointed to the wheelchair in the corner. "That was real for a few months. I needed the help. I recovered much faster than I let on, but I noticed something strange." He took a sip of his tea. "I started noticing things. Pills missing from the weekly organizer Kendra filled for me. Prescription bottles moved." He looked up at me, his eyes burning. "She was experimenting. Seeing how much she could give me to keep me foggy, but not enough to kill me, not yet." "But why? Why would she do that?" Harrison tapped the table. "Greed. Pure and simple." He reached down and, to my shock, pressed a hidden latch under the kitchen island. A small panel popped open, revealing a recessed compartment. From it, he pulled a thick manila folder. "I started keeping track," he said, opening the folder on the table. "Every pill count, every bank statement, every conversation where I pretended to be more confused than I was." The folder was overflowing. There were pages of handwritten notes in a precise, clear script. There were bank statements with dozens of entries highlighted in yellow. There were printouts of emails and photos of pill bottles. "How long have you been doing this?" I asked, my mind struggling to catch up. 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days, he said, without a moment's hesitation. "Ever since the morning I overheard her on the phone with an estate lawyer, asking how much longer I was likely to live and what the probate process would look like." My hands were shaking so badly I had to set my mug down. "She was planning?" "She was planning to put me in a home," he said, "a specific one. A place that specializes in patients with advanced dementia who can't advocate for themselves." He slid a document across the table. It was a photocopy of an intake form for a long-term care facility. Kendra's signature was at the bottom. The patient description read, "Harold Garrett, severe cognitive decline, episodes of aggression, a danger to himself and others." This is a lie," I whispered. "It's fraud," he corrected, "but it's a very convincing lie. She's been my primary caregiver. She accompanies me to every doctor's appointment, where she describes symptoms I supposedly exhibit at home. The doctor, of course, believes her." He turned to the bank statements. "She got herself added as a joint account holder, telling the bank I was forgetful and needed help with my finances." I looked at the statements. Hundreds, then thousands withdrawn. Regular transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. "Why didn't you stop her, report her?" Harrison's laugh was bitter. "To whom, Corinne? The bank sees a devoted stepdaughter. The doctor sees a declining patient. Even your son. Even Mitchell believes I'm losing my mind because that's what his wife tells him every single day. Mitchell, I said, the name tasting like ash. He knows about this? Mitchell knows what Kendra tells him, Harrison said, his voice softening just a fraction. He knows I get confused. He knows I forget my medication. He knows I'm a handful. Your daughter-in-law is very, very convincing. I thought of every interaction I'd seen. Kendra's patient sigh, her gentle, condescending redirection when Harrison tried to speak, her sad explanations to others right in front of him. But she's your daughter, I argued, grasping at straws. No, Harrison said quietly. She's not. Kendra is my late wife's daughter from her first marriage. I helped raise her from age 12. I paid for her college. I walked her down the aisle when she married your son. He leaned closer. But legally, I am just the man who inherited her mother's house when Hannah died. The pieces slammed into place with sickening force. The house. She wants this house. The house, my savings, my pension, everything. He turned his gaze to the window, the afternoon light fading. And she was slowly succeeding, stealing my life, one condescending pat on the head at a time. You mentioned the medication, I said, my voice barely a whisper. You said she was drugging you. She convinced my doctor I was having trouble sleeping. Harrison nodded. He prescribed a mild sedative, but she's been giving me double doses, plus an over-the-counter sleep aid she crushes into my food. He held up one of the photos from his folder. It showed a small pile of blue powder next to a mortar and pestle. It's just enough to keep me genuinely foggy and compliant, he said, just enough to make her lies look true. Harrison, that's attempted murder. Yes, he agreed, but the beauty of her plan is that it all looks so caring. A devoted stepdaughter, struggling to manage a difficult old man. This is insane, I said, standing up and pacing the kitchen. We have to call the police right now, Adult Protective Services, someone. And tell them what? Harrison said, his voice sharp, cutting through my panic. That a woman with power of attorney, who all my doctors believe is my primary caregiver, is trying to harm me. They'll see an old man whose own records describe him as confused and aggressive, making paranoid delusions. They'll call her, and she'll have me committed by morning. He was right. He had been so thorough in his deception that he'd trapped himself. So what's the plan? I asked, turning to face him. Why did they leave now? Why Ireland? Harrison's expression grew dark. The trip isn't a vacation, Corinne. It's an alibi. He reached back into the hidden compartment and pulled out a second, thicker folder. He opened it. What I saw inside made my breath hitch in my throat. Photographs, timelines, and on top, a document that made my hands shake. It was a copy of his death certificate, dated 3 days from now, December 26th. What is this? It's what they're expecting to find when they return, Harrison said, his voice eerily calm. A tragedy. An elderly man with dementia who forgot his heart medication became confused, wandered outside in the cold, and suffered a fatal cardiac episode. This is premeditated murder, I whispered. Yes, it is. He pulled out a small, black digital recorder. This isn't the only one. I have 6 of them hidden throughout this house. I've been recording them for 8 months. You've been... Ever since I overheard Kendra telling Mitchell that Christmas would be the perfect time. The house would be empty, the weather would be bad, and if something happened, it would look completely natural. He showed me transcripts. Kendra, on the phone, discussing his heart medication. Mitchell talking about insurance policies, both of them planning. But the death certificate, how? Kendra has a contact who works in medical records at the county hospital, Harrison explained. Someone who's already helped her with the forged dementia paperwork. They've been very thorough. I felt sick. Harrison, we must call the police. No, he said, his voice firm. We can't. Think, Corinne. How do I explain this? Evidence obtained illegally by a man who has been lying to his own doctors for 2 years. They'd throw it all out. He paused, and his eyes, which had been hard with anger, now held a new, calculating light. And besides, there's something else. Something I discovered last week that changes everything. Harrison turned to another section of the folder. It contained legal documents and bank statements I didn't recognize. I'm not just Harold Garrett, confused stepfather living on a small pension, he said. He looked me straight in the eye. I'm Harold Garrett, retired private investigator, 42 years of experience in fraud detection and surveillance. The words hung in the air like a gunshot. The frail, quiet man I thought I knew simply evaporated. In his place sat someone sharp, analytical, and dangerous. You're a PI? Was, he said. I retired when I married Hannah 15 years ago, but you never lose the skills. He stood up from the chair again, walking to the window and looking out at the perfectly manicured lawn. When I had my stroke, it was real. I was vulnerable. But as I recovered, my instincts kicked in. The discrepancies in my bank account, the missing pills. Old habits. I started investigating my own daughter-in-law from a wheelchair. So the medication? She's not really drugging you? Oh, she's drugging me all right. Or she thinks she is, he said, turning back. She gives me the pills every night, dissolved in tea. I've been disposing of them down the sink drain for a year. I take my correct medication from a bottle I keep hidden in the crawl space. My God, Harrison, how long have you been planning this counter operation? Since the moment I realized they were planning to kill me, he said, his voice flat. I knew I needed irrefutable evidence, and I knew I needed an outside witness, someone they trusted, someone who couldn't be dismissed as a confused old man. The realization hit me. Me. That's why I'm here. That's why I made sure you'd be here, he confirmed. I've been subtly encouraging Mitchell to invite you for Christmas for months. Mentioning how lonely I was, how nice it would be to have real family here for the holidays. The complexity of it was staggering. He hadn't just been investigating, he'd been manipulating the manipulators. What about the Ireland trip? I encouraged that too, Harrison nodded. I overheard Kendra complaining about how stressful the holidays would be with me and you here. When Mitchell nervously mentioned they might take a trip instead, I made sure to seem pathetically enthusiastic. Told him I'd be fine on my own. But you knew you wouldn't be, I said. You knew I was coming. I knew you'd be here, he said. What I didn't know, what I couldn't be sure of, was whether you'd believe me. His sharp investigator's eyes searched my face. Do you believe me, Corinne? I looked at this man. This stranger who I'd pitied for years, this actor who had been running a deep cover operation from his own living room. I believe you, I said. But Harrison, what's the end game? What are we going to do? A smile spread across his face, and for the first time it was a real smile, and it had teeth. We, he said, are going to give them exactly what they want. We're going to let them come home and find Harold Garrett dead. We're going to what? I hissed, my voice cracking. We are going to stage my death, Harrison said, sitting back down at the table, all business. We'll follow their script to the letter. We'll let them believe their plan worked perfectly. He leaned forward, the smile gone, replaced by a cold intensity. And then, when they're celebrating, when they're discussing their alibi and the inheritance, when they have incriminated themselves beyond any shadow of a doubt, we're going to bring Harold Garrett back from the dead. That's insane, I stammered. That's justice, he retorted. They want to murder an old man for his money and get away with it. Instead, they're going to confess to murdering an old man while he records every single word. The audacity of it was terrifying, but as I looked at the forged death certificate on the table, I knew he was right. We couldn't go to the police. This was the only way. "Okay," I said, taking a deep breath. "What's the plan?" "The key to any successful operation," Harrison began, slipping into the language of his old profession, "is making sure every detail matches what the adversary expects to find. They've planned this. We just have to follow their script." He pulled out a notebook. "According to their conversations, they expect to find me in the backyard," he said, his voice chillingly neutral as he discussed his own demise. "The narrative will be that I became confused during the night, thought I heard Hannah calling me, and wandered outside in my pajamas. And the cold and the stress. Trigger a heart attack," I finished, remembering the forged certificate. "But you don't have heart problems," I said. "Actually, I do," he corrected. "Mild coronary artery disease. It's in my medical records, which Kendra has access to. Nothing serious if medicated, but it's the perfect pre-existing condition to make the tragedy believable." "They've thought of everything," I murmured. "They've thought of almost everything," Harrison said. "They made one critical error. They assumed I was too far gone to fight back." He laid out the next 24 hours. "The recording equipment is crucial. I have microphones in the living room, the kitchen, their bedroom, and the study where they keep the financial paperwork. Everything they say will be captured." "What if they don't say anything?" I asked. Harrison's smile was grim. "Trust me, they will. I've studied them for 2 years. Mitchell can't keep a secret, and Kendra cannot resist gloating when she thinks she's won." He showed me a hiding spot in the crawl space beneath the house, accessed through a hidden panel in the basement. He'd already stocked it with a prepaid cell phone, clothes, and wireless receivers for his microphones. "What about me?" I asked. "What's my role?" "You are the innocent, grieving family member who discovered the tragedy," he said, handing me a typed script. "When they return, you'll be here, devastated. You will have already called the authorities. You will tell them exactly what they plan to happen." I read the script. It was simple, brilliant. I'd find his empty room on Christmas morning. I'd find the back door open. I'd find him collapsed in the yard. I'd call 911. The paramedics would pronounce him dead. "But Harrison," I said, "there won't be a body. The paramedics, the morgue. How do we fake that?" "That," he said, "is the most beautiful part of the plan. I have a contact at Pinnacle Funeral Services, an old friend I worked with back in the day. He's agreed to help us. He's going to, what, provide a body?" I asked, horrified. "He's going to provide paperwork," Harrison clarified. "He'll backdate the intake forms. He'll file the initial report. As far as the county records are concerned, Harold Garrett will be officially deceased and in his care." The plan was staggering in its complexity. Every official record would support the story. "Now," Harrison said, picking up his phone, "let's confirm the final details with my friend. His name is Paul. He's the director at Pinnacle." He dialed the number and put it on speaker. It rang 3 times, then went to voicemail. "Paul, it's Harrison. Just calling to confirm we're moving ahead tomorrow morning. Call me back." He hung up, a slight frown on his face. That's odd. He always picks up. We waited. The silence in the kitchen stretched, thick with tension. My own pulse was a frantic bird in my chest. After 10 minutes, the phone buzzed on the table. Harrison answered it immediately, putting it back on speaker. "Paul, everything all right?" "Harrison, I can't do it." The man's voice was a strained whisper. "What do you mean you can't do it?" Harrison's voice was suddenly ice. "She came by, Harrison. Your stepdaughter, Kendra. She was here today, right before you arrived." "What?" She was here this morning, dropping off paperwork, a copy of your living will," she said, "one that gives her full authority, and she was—" "I don't know, Harrison." She was asking questions about cremation processing, about death certificates. She mentioned she has a friend in the county clerk's office. She was intimidating. Paul, listen to me. No, you listen. I'm sorry. I'm an old man. I've got a business to protect. I can't get involved in this. I won't. I'm out. Don't call this number again. The line clicked, dead. The silence in the room was absolute. Our entire plan, the linchpin of the official death, was gone. The advantage was lost. He's terrified, I whispered. She got to him. Harrison stared at the phone, his face pale. He closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, the fear was gone, replaced by a cold fury I hadn't seen before. He's right, Harrison said, his voice quiet. She's thorough. She was checking on her assets. So it's over, I said, slumping into a chair. We have to call the police. It's the only way now. No. I looked up. Harrison was already moving. He went to his bedroom and opened the closet, revealing a wall safe I'd never seen. It's not over. It just got more complicated and a lot more dangerous. He spun the dial, opened the safe, and pulled out stacks of documents and what looked like several $1,000s in cash. I wasn't entirely honest about my financial situation, he said. Kendra knows about this house and my primary checking account. She has no idea about the rest. He tossed a bank ledger onto the table. I opened it. The numbers made my eyes widen. Over $300,000 in one account, investment portfolios, property deeds for rentals in 2 other states. Harrison, you're wealthy, I said. I was a very good investigator, he said grimly, and I have resources Kendra can't even imagine. Paul backing out is a problem, but it's not a fatal one. We just have to change the plan. Change it how? We don't have a body. We don't have a funeral home. We don't need a body if the body has already been destroyed, he said. He picked up his phone again and dialed a new number. Daryl, it's Garrett. Yes, it's been a long time, I know. Listen, I'm calling in that favor. The big one. Yes, I need you to do what you do best. I need a ghost in the machine. I'm sending you a file. I need it entered into the county vital records system. And I need it to look like it came from Pinnacle Funeral Services. Tonight. He listened for a moment, then nodded. It's life and death, Daryl. My life. He hung up. Who was that? An old contact. The best digital forensics man I ever knew. He owes me. Harrison looked at me, his eyes blazing. We can't fake a body anymore, so we'll fake the bureaucracy. Daryl will hack the county records and digitally file my death certificate. It'll look 100% official. But the funeral home? What do we tell them? That's where your role changes, Corinne, and it just got much, much harder. He grabbed the script he'd written for me and tore it in half. There's no 911 call, no paramedics. When they get home, you're not just the woman who found him. You're the woman who has already handled everything. What do you mean? The new story, he said, is that you found me on Christmas morning. You called Pinnacle Funeral Services directly, Paul's number, which they'll recognize. But per the living will that Kendra herself provided, my explicit instructions were for no service and immediate cremation. My blood turned to ice. So, when they get back, there's no body to see. There's no morgue to call. There's only an urn of ashes on the mantel and an official state-issued death certificate in your hand. The evidence of their crime will have already been conveniently destroyed by the very process they were counting on. Harrison, this is a huge risk. What if they call the funeral home? They will, and Paul, being terrified, will lie to protect himself. He'll deny everything. That's why your performance has to be perfect. You have to be the grieving, hysterical, overwhelmed woman who was just following Harrison's final wishes. You'll have the paperwork. You'll have the ashes. By the time they can untangle the misunderstanding, we'll have their confession on tape. The danger of it settled over me like a shroud. We weren't just staging a scene. We were committing fraud, forgery, and identity theft. "If we make one mistake," I whispered, "if they suspect anything, then I really will end up dead," he finished. He reached across the table and took my hand. His grip was strong and steady. "Are you with me, Corinne? Because once we start this, there is no going back." I looked into the eyes of this man, this retired investigator who was gambling his life on a digital ghost and my ability to lie to my own son. "What do you need me to do?" The next 24 hours were a masterclass in deception. Harrison, now fully in his PI mode, was a meticulous and demanding teacher. "No, Corinne, not like that. You're not sad. You're shattered. You're traumatized. You've just handled the death and cremation of a family member, all by yourself. You're exhausted." We rehearsed it, over and over. He bought a generic heavy urn from an online marketplace for same-day delivery. He had his contact, Daryl, email him the forged, official-looking death certificate, which we printed on heavy cardstock. "The key is the living will," he explained, showing me a copy of the document Kendra had given to the funeral home. "You're not the villain here. You're just the one who found this document in my desk. You were following my orders. You'll show them this. You'll tell them you didn't know what else to do." He coached me on what to say when they inevitably called Pinnacle Funeral Services. "You'll tell them, 'What do you mean you never spoke to me? I spoke to a man named Paul. He handled everything. Are you telling me my stepfather-in-law isn't dead?' You turn their denial into an accusation of their incompetence. You'll be hysterical. They'll be confused. And in that confusion, Kendra and Mitchell will hear only one thing. The official record says I'm dead, and the body is gone." By the afternoon of December 24th, the stage was set. The urn was on the mantel. The forged documents were in a file on the coffee table. Harrison had wired the house for sound, with the receiver and a small monitor hidden in his basement crawl space. "Tomorrow morning, you wake up. You make the discovery. You find the back door open, my pajamas in the yard, just as they planned," he instructed. "But instead of calling 911, you find my living will. You call the funeral home. You handle it. You spend the next 4 days grieving and making arrangements for the memorial service." "Memorial service?" "Of course," he smiled. "They'll need a way to perform their grief for the public. We'll schedule one. And that is where we'll spring the trap." That evening, we finalized the last details. Harrison showed me the emergency cash in the safe. "If something goes wrong," he said, his voice serious, "if they see through it, you take this and the evidence folders and you run. You go straight to Detective Marshall. She's an old friend, the only cop I still trust. She's on standby, but I don't want to bring her in unless we have the confession. It's the only thing that makes the rest of this admissible." He gave me her personal number. "Memorize it." I did. "Get some sleep, Corinne," he said, patting my arm. "Tomorrow is going to be the most important performance of both our lives." As I lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling, I knew I wouldn't sleep. I was an accomplice to a massive, dangerous charade. But when I thought of Harrison, trapped in that nursing home, being slowly poisoned to death, I knew we had no other choice. December 29th. The house had been a tomb for 4 days. I'd spent the time perfecting my role, moving through the silent rooms, creating the props of my grief. Sympathy cards I'd written to myself from concerned neighbors sat on the coffee table. A brochure for Pinnacle Funeral Services lay open beside them. Harrison was in the crawl space, monitoring his equipment, listening. I was terrified. At 2:15 p.m. I heard it. The sound I had been dreading and anticipating. A car in the driveway. I looked through the window. It was them. Mitchell and Kendra pulling their bags from a rental car, both looking tanned and relaxed from their trip to Ireland. They stood on the walkway for a moment, and I saw Kendra say something to Mitchell. He nodded grimly. They were steeling themselves for the discovery. I took a shaky breath, just as Harrison had coached me. You are shattered. You are exhausted. I opened the front door before they could even get their key in the lock. Mitchell, I said. The tears that came were shockingly real. Not for Harrison, who was very much alive and listening beneath my feet, but for my son, for the man standing in front of me that I no longer recognized. He froze. Mom? What's wrong? Why are you crying? Kendra stepped forward, her face a perfect mask of practiced concern. Corinne, what's happened? Is he okay? It was a perfect delivery. Worried but not panicked, as if she genuinely feared the worst. Oh, Mitchell. I let my voice break, leaning against the doorframe. He's gone. He died. On Christmas morning. I watched their faces. It was exactly as Harrison predicted. Not grief, not shock, relief. Their plan had worked. Oh my God, Mitchell said, his voice carefully modulated to sound horrified. Mom, what happened? I led them into the living room. The first thing they saw was the urn on the mantel. What is that? Kendra asked, her voice sharp. I found him, I began, sinking onto the sofa, letting my hands tremble. On Christmas morning, his room was empty. The back door was open. I pointed to the file on the table. He was in the yard, in his pajamas. I think his heart just gave out. Kendra covered her mouth, her eyes wide. He went outside? They think he got confused, I whispered. Maybe he thought he heard Hannah. I watched Kendra's face as I said the words she herself had planned. The tension around her eyes visibly melted. It was the exact scenario they'd engineered. But the urn? Mitchell asked, pointing. Mom, where is he? I didn't know what to do, I said, my voice rising into the practiced hysteria. I called 911. They said it was too late. His heart condition, the cold. And then I found this. I fumbled with the folder, pulling out the living will. Harrison, he didn't want a service. He wanted immediate cremation. It's all in here. I just called the number on his desk, Pinnacle Funeral Services. I was just following his wishes. Kendra snatched the death certificate from my hand. She stared at it. This is official. Yes, I sobbed. They handled everything. They were very efficient. The silence in the room was electric. I could see the wheels turning in Kendra's head. No body, no autopsy. The evidence was already ashes. I can't believe we weren't here, Mitchell said, and I heard a trace of what might have been real regret. There's nothing we could have done, darling, Kendra said, putting a hand on his arm. Her voice was pure, soothing reassurance. You know how he was. If he was determined to go outside, we couldn't have stopped him. The casual, clinical way she spoke of him made my stomach turn. But Pinnacle? Kendra said, her eyes narrowing slightly. They just came and got him, just like that? Yes, I said. I spoke to a man named Paul. He was very kind. Kendra pulled out her phone. I need to confirm the arrangements. This was it. The moment Harrison and I had rehearsed, she dialed the number. I heard it ring. Yes, this is Kendra Peterson, Harold Garrett's stepdaughter. I'm calling about... Yes, What? What do you mean you have no record? I stood up. What? What are they saying? Kendra held up a hand, her face hardening. Sir, I'm holding his death certificate. It says, No, you listen to me. What do you mean, you never spoke to her? She looked at me, her eyes pure venom. He says they never spoke to you, that they have no record of picking up Harrison. I let out a wail. What? That's impossible. I spoke to him. I spoke to Paul. He's lying. Are you telling me, oh my God, Mitchell, are you telling me that's not Harrison? What did they do with him? I grabbed the phone from Kendra's hand. Hello? Paul? This is Corinne. You took him. What do you mean you don't know me? You're lying, you monster. I threw the phone at the sofa. I collapsed, sobbing hysterically. They lost him. They lost his body. Oh my God, it worked. Kendra and Mitchell looked at each other, not with suspicion, but with a new, horrified confusion. The official death certificate was in their hand. The funeral home was denying it. Kendra, Mitchell said, his voice low. What if she's right? What if this funeral home, what if they messed up? Shut up, Mitchell. Kendra grabbed the certificate. This is what matters. It's filed with the county. It's official. The rest is just paperwork. A clerical error. Mom, she said, her voice softening as she turned back to me. It's okay. You're upset. It's probably just some mix-up at their office. We'll sort it out. The important thing is, he's at peace. She had bought it. The confusion was her new narrative. The funeral home was incompetent. The death was real. Later that evening, after I'd cried myself to sleep in the guest room, I crept into the hallway. The house was quiet. I waited. And then, just as Harrison predicted, I heard them. Their voices carried clearly from the living room, right where the best microphone was hidden. Can you believe how perfectly this worked out? Kendra's voice was a low, satisfied purr. Even the timing. Christmas. Emergency services are slow, everyone's distracted. I still can't believe he actually just wandered outside, Mitchell replied. I thought we'd have to be more direct. The beauty of psychological manipulation, darling, Kendra said, and I could hear the pride in her voice. You don't have to lay a hand on them. I've been conditioning him for months, talking about Hannah, making him think he heard her voice, a few extra sleeping pills in his tea every night for a week, just enough to make him disoriented. Nature did the rest. My hands were shaking so hard I had to brace myself against the wall. It was all there. And the will? Mitchell asked. You're sure? I've been his legal representative for 2 years. Everything transfers to me as his next of kin. The house alone is worth $400,000, plus his savings. Everything. And no one will ever question it. What about this funeral home mess? It's better this way, Kendra laughed. A soft, satisfied sound. It's perfect. They're incompetent. They lost the body. They'll deny everything to cover their own tracks. And all we have is an official death certificate and an urn of ashes. There is nothing to trace back to us. It's the perfect, clean getaway. And my mom, Mitchell said, his voice hesitant. I feel bad lying to her. She'll never know, Kendra said, her voice cold. She was the perfect witness. Having her discover, handle everything, it gives us complete credibility. As far as the world is concerned, Harold Garrett died of natural causes while we were on vacation. Case closed. They kept talking, discussing the insurance claims, the timeline for selling the house. I crept back to my room, my heart pounding. We had it. We had it all. I went down to the basement to the crawl space panel. Harrison, I whispered. I'm here. His voice came from the dark. Did you? Every word, I said, my voice shaking with adrenaline. They confessed to everything, the pills, the manipulation, the alibi. Perfect, I heard him whisper. He emerged from the panel, stiff and cramped, but his eyes blazing. Now, we plan the funeral. January the 2nd arrived, bitter and cold. The memorial service was scheduled for 10 Nagu a.m. at Pinnacle Funeral Services. It was Kendra's idea, a way to get closure, and I knew, to perform her role as grieving stepdaughter for the community. The small chapel was half full, old neighbors, a few people from Harrison's old church. I sat in the front row, wedged between Mitchell and Kendra. Kendra, in a chic black dress, dabbed at her dry eyes with a tissue. Mitchell stared straight ahead, his jaw locked. They had no idea that Harrison was sitting in the back row, disguised in a gray wig, heavy glasses, and a coat borrowed from his PI wardrobe. He looked like just another elderly mourner. The casket at the front of the chapel was empty. Kendra had arranged for a ceremonial service, telling everyone the cremation had already taken place. She had no idea how right she was. Pastor Wallace, who had known Harrison for years, began the eulogy. He spoke of a kind, gentle man devoted to his late wife, Hannah. Harold faced his final years with courage, the pastor said, surrounded by family who loved him and cared for his needs with incredible devotion. I felt Kendra stiffen beside me, soaking in the praise. When the pastor finished, he invited others to speak. A few neighbors did. Then Kendra stood up. "I'd like to say something about my stepfather." She walked to the podium, the picture of grieving elegance. "Harold came into my life when I was 12, she began, her voice thick with practiced emotion. "He never once made me feel like I was anything other than his own daughter." The lies flowed like poisoned honey. She spoke of his wisdom, his patience, his unconditional love. "In his final years," she said, her voice breaking perfectly, "I was honored to be able to care for him, the same way he had cared for me. It was never a burden. It was a blessing." I had to grip the pew to keep from screaming. This woman, who had plotted his murder for money, was accepting accolades for her devotion. "We are heartbroken," she concluded, "but we take comfort in knowing he is reunited with my mother, the love of his life." She dabbed her eyes and returned to her seat, where Mitchell squeezed her hand. The chapel murmured in sympathy. Pastor Wallace stepped back to the podium. "Thank you, Kendra, for those beautiful words, if there is no one else." "Excuse me, Pastor." A reedy voice cut through the silence. From the third row, Mrs. Prescott, Harrison's nosy neighbor, was slowly getting to her feet. Kendra tensed. I'd spoken to Mrs. Prescott, and she had been one of the ones who'd fully believed Kendra's "poor me," caring for a difficult old man routine. "Mrs. Prescott," Pastor Wallace said, surprised. "Please." The elderly woman walked to the front, leaning heavily on her cane. That was a lovely speech, Kendra," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "Very moving, but it's odd." "Odd?" Kendra asked, her smile tightening. "Yes," Mrs. Prescott said, turning to the congregation. "You see, I spoke to Harold quite a bit, over the fence, and he never seemed confused to me." "Not really." A murmur went through the chapel. "He seemed watchful," she continued, "and I know for a fact just last month he told me. He said, 'You be careful, Martha. You can't trust everyone, not even family.'" She turned and looked right at Kendra. "And you know, he told me he didn't trust you." The air was sucked from the room. Kendra's face went white. "Mrs. Prescott, you're mistaken," Kendra spat. He was unwell. He was paranoid." "He didn't seem paranoid to me," the old woman shot back. "He seemed scared." Before Kendra could respond, another voice echoed from the back of the chapel. "She's right. He was scared, and I never trusted you." Every head in the chapel swiveled. There, at the back, Harrison stood, pulling off the gray wig and glasses. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Kendra's face crumpled. It wasn't shock. It was pure, unadulterated terror. Mitchell half rose from his seat, his mouth opening and closing, making no sound. Harrison walked slowly, steadily, down the center aisle. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice strong and clear, filling the chapel, "I want to thank you all for coming to my funeral. It's not every day a man gets to hear his own eulogy." People were laughing nervously, looking around, trying to understand. Harrison reached the front and turned to face them. "I'm sorry for the deception. But it was necessary to expose a terrible crime." He looked directly at Kendra and Mitchell, who were frozen in the front pew. "You see," he announced, "my stepdaughter, Kendra, has been systematically drugging me, stealing my money, and planning my murder for the past 2 years." The chapel went dead silent. She convinced everyone I had dementia when I was actually being poisoned to make me seem confused. She orchestrated this entire tragedy to make my death look like an accident, all while she and my stepson were conveniently in Ireland celebrating their inheritance. This is insane," Kendra finally shrieked, finding her voice. He's clearly confused. He does have dementia. Look at him." "Am I?" Harrison asked calmly. "Am I confused? Fortunately, I'm also a retired private investigator, and I've been documenting everything." He turned toward the back of the chapel just as 2 uniformed police officers and a woman in a detective suit entered. "Detective Marshall," Harrison called out. "Would you be so kind?" The detective nodded and held up a small, powerful speaker. Harrison pressed a button on a remote in his pocket. Kendra's voice, cold, clear, and proud, filled the chapel. "The beauty of psychological manipulation, darling. You don't have to lay a hand on them. A few extra sleeping pills in his tea every night. Just enough to make him disoriented. Nature did the rest." The gasps were screams now. Mrs. Prescott clutched her chest. Then Mitchell's voice. "And the will? You're sure?" And Kendra's reply. "Everything transfers to me. The house alone is worth $400,000, plus his savings. Everything. Case closed." The recording clicked off. The silence that followed was heavier than any grief. "This is a setup," Kendra screamed, lunging to her feet. He's been manipulating us." "Yes, I have," Harrison agreed, his voice booming. "Just like I pretended to have dementia for 2 years while you slowly tried to murder me. The difference, Kendra, is that my deception was to save my life. Yours was to commit murder for profit." Detective Marshall stepped forward, her voice all business. "Kendra Peterson, Mitchell Garrett, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, elder abuse, and financial fraud." The arrest was fast. The officers were on them in a second. Mitchell went limp, his face a mask of gray defeat. But Kendra fought. She twisted, she screamed, she clawed. "He's lying, he's the criminal, he faked his own death." As the handcuffs clicked into place, her eyes found mine. They were filled with a hatred so pure, it was terrifying. "You!" she spat. "You were in on it! You bitch!" I stood up slowly, meeting her gaze without flinching. "I knew you were trying to kill a good man for his money, Kendra." I nodded toward the empty casket. "You loved his bank account, not him." The police dragged them, screaming and silent, out of the chapel. The mourners filed out, stunned, whispering, some stopping to shake Harrison's hand, to touch his arm, as if to confirm he was real. Finally, Harrison and I were alone in the empty room. "It's over," he said quietly. "Is it?" I asked, my knees finally starting to shake. "Will it stick? With those recordings, the financial evidence, and the testimony from a very angry Detective Marshall about the forged county documents?" "Oh, yes," Harrison said. "They're gone, for a very, very long time." He looked at the empty space where the casket had been. "In trying to bury me, they buried themselves." "What happens now?" I asked. Harrison smiled. It was the first time I'd seen him smile with genuine peace. "Now," he said, "I get to live, on my own terms, no more pretending." He turned to me, his expression serious. "And you, Corinne, have to decide if you can forgive an old man for putting you through all this." I thought about my son, sitting in a police car, his life destroyed by his own greed and weakness. I thought about the terror of the last week, the lies, the risk. And I thought about Harrison, who had used his brilliant mind to fight his way back from the grave his own family had dug for him. "There's nothing to forgive, Harrison," I said. "You saved your own life." 6 months later, I received an email. It was from Harrison. He'd sold the house and moved to Flagstaff, Arizona. He said the high desert air was good for his lungs. He'd sent a photo. He was standing on a hiking trail, smiling, looking 10 years younger. He was volunteering with a local elder fraud task force, teaching seniors how to protect themselves from financial predators. Kendra had been sentenced to 18 years. Mitchell, for his full cooperation against his wife, received 8. The house, the money, all of it had been seized or donated to charity. I looked at the picture of Harrison, free and alive. I'd learned something hard about family and loyalty. Sometimes the people who share your blood are the ones who will betray you most deeply. And sometimes your truest allies are the ones you'd never expect. Harrison and I email regularly. We are, as he puts it, unlikely friends, bonded in battle. His last email made me smile. "Thank you, Corinne," he wrote. "Thank you for believing in a dead man's story. It made all the difference in helping him come back to life." If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.